Hello, and welcome to another Ancient Warfare episode of Ancient Warfare Answered. Murray and I are answering some questions we got from our listeners. I'll just say listeners because what Murray was saying was a bit long. I can't remember what he said last time.
Ancient Warfare enthusiasts.
Oh, yes, Ancient Warfare answering questions enthusiasts with words.
Exactly.
Yes. Well, one question we got was about female warriors who seem to have been around on the steppes. And were there any others? Murray, can you tell us anything?
Well, obviously, in recent times, there's been quite a bit of excitement about archaeological finds which seem to show female remains which are associated with weapons. And obviously, that's got a lot of people excited about female warriors from the steppes. That links in with the idea of Amazon warriors and, of course, Penthesilea from the Iliad, and lots of excitement about that. And, of course, there are other stories of women warriors, women, manning the walls in Aeneas Tacticus and things like that. But there are lots of examples of female warriors and female leaders inspiring their troops, which sort of pepper Greek and Roman history, which is quite fascinating in itself. Perhaps the most famous example is Artemisia, who fought at the Battle of Salamis in 480. And of course, she also was one of the few, according to Herodotus, who advised Xerxes that he shouldn't fight the Battle of Salamis. And then, of course, he did fight the Battle of Salamis. And so her advice was proven right. But in the battle, she won the award from the Persians for the bravest Persian fighter, even though, according to Herodotus, what she in fact did was, being pursued by a Athenian trireme, she turned and rammed one of her own allied ships, so that the Athenian trireme thought either, oh, whoops, we were chasing the wrong ship, or no, she's changed sides at just the right moment, will be for us, let's fight someone else. And so, Xerxes sees this and goes, that's what I need. My women have become men and my men have become women. And that's fascinating in itself. But there's actually a lot more going on, because one of the ships that she seems to ram is in fact one of her rivals in Anatolia. So she's the female tyrant of Halicarnassus. She decides that she's going to lead her fleet of 5 ships herself. They're reputed to be the second best ships in the entire Persian navy. So there's clearly an authority and a sort of female figurehead, but she also seems to be tactically relied upon and regarded as having a good tactical head on her shoulders, even by Xerxes. So that's a fascinating example. And there's lots of other anecdotes in the historians about female leadership. And when you start to think about it, there actually tends to be quite a few. For instance, Boudica is obviously a very important sort of example for a female leader, whether or not we think that she's the general, but she's certainly there to inspire the troops. Even Cleopatra, at the Battle of Actium, Cleopatra mans her ship at the same time as Antony mans the ships. So is she there as a figurehead for the Egyptian navy? I mean, we all know that Antony and Cleopatra lose the Battle of Actium, but she's on the water in the battle. So chances are that she's there as more than just an observer. The other thing you've got, of course, is even in late Roman history, you have when the Goths have won the Battle of Adrianople and they are, ravaging all of Thrace, they come up to the walls of Constantinople. And one version, Ammianus Marcellinus's version, is that the Magister Militum Julius is the one who organizes defenses and is able to sort of see them off. But in Socrates of Constantinople and Sozomen's version, it's actually the late Emperor Valens' wife, Dominica, and she's the one who organizes the defense and arms the troops from her own private funds, and they see off the Goths. So there's lots of examples of women inspiring as commanders, but also commanding, I suppose, and to the point where you've got something like Polyaenus' Stratagems of War. So he writes 8 books of the Stratagems of War. The first 7 books are Greeks and peoples. And then in book 8, he has a very brief number, 25 stratagems of Roman commanders. And then the remainder of the book is the stratagems of women. So, in fact, Polyaenus is able to include like 40-odd stratagems of women. There might have been more because the last book is fragmentary. So they're all different eras, mostly from the Near East and Greece, but there's a couple of Roman examples in there too, which is fascinating in itself. And then you have other things like Plutarch's Mulerium Virtutes, the virtues of women. So there's a sort of a tradition of recording when women did strategic or tactical things, both in warfare and out of warfare. So there are examples of these warring women, shall we say, outside of the steppe nomad tradition. And the other thing about Artemisia, of course, is that the Athenians put a reward out for someone to sink her ship or capture her, because they were so afraid of a woman making war on them. And of course, that's taken up by Aristophanes in some of his comedies, that this is both something that we can laugh about, but it's a real moment of panic for the Athenians to think that a woman could arm themselves and fight, and that if the Athenian women get that idea, then they're in real trouble. So it's a fascinating sort of aspect of warfare, that when they decide to fight, they absolutely show that they can sock it to the men, and the men of the ancient world get really worried by this, which is fascinating in itself.
Cool. So lots of leaders. Are there any units of women that we know of?
Not that I know.
Warriors.
I don't know. I think that there are certainly women in battle lines, and some of the historical accounts of battles say that there are women mixed in with the troops, and that well, what were they doing there? And I think the traditional historiography is that they were tending the wounded, which there's no evidence of. They could surely hurl a missile, whether it be a javelin or a sling or even fire a bow. There's nothing to say they didn't do those sorts of things. So I think that's something that there certainly is the possibility of, that they acted. And again, from a city's walls, throwing rocks, stones, or manning walls is something that they can do equally well as anyone else. So there certainly is.
As Pyrrhus found out, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah. A well-aimed, and of course Ben-Hur. I wonder where that idea came from. A well-aimed roof tile is a fabulously effective weapon. So indeed, the idea that this is a male-only sphere is perhaps completely misguided. So I think there's absolutely evidence that women could certainly have fought and wanted to fight. But that, obviously most of our source material is written by male historians, and they tend not to emphasize the role of women in those sorts of things. But I think you could quite easily make a case that they were invested in the defense of their city and the defense of their walls in several instances.
All right. Thank you. Talk again.